Hello and welcome to this professional development training. My name is Stephanie. I am your host and founder at the Intentional IEP, and I am your veteran special education teacher and resident IEP coach. And it is my hope that with these trainings, I can make you feel like a more effective and efficient IEP writer so you get to do more of what you love, and that's teach. In today's training, we're going to be talking about what to do before the IEP meeting, what to do during the IEP meeting, and what to do after the IEP meeting. So all things IEP meeting today. I also have two free downloads that you're going to want to download before we go any further in this training. They're linked below this training. They're both free. The first one is the IEP writing timeline. We're going to be talking all about this, and also the IEP meeting checklist. So I'm going to give you a second to go ahead and click below this training, download those free resources. Whether you want to print them off now or later is completely up to you. Once you have those, come back and hit play, and we're going to get started. All right, first things first, we need to talk about the things that you should be doing before your next annual IEP meeting. So there are a lot of things to do before an IEP meeting, before you even get to writing the actual IEP. And so here's what we're going to do, and we're going to break it down real simple for you. Before the IEP meeting, you're going to utilize the IEP writing timeline. Also, a whole section here at the top of the IEP meeting checklist that we're going to go over. But before we even write the IEP, before we even get there, we're going to talk about this specifically here. So the IEP writing timeline is something I created for myself when I was oh my goodness, I think a fifth or a sixth year special education teacher, because I was tired of writing the IEP before the IEP meeting. I wanted to be more collaborative and talk with parents and other team members and stop writing the IEP by myself. So this is what I created. And this is what you have available to you today. Again, it is a free download. Check it out below this training. So about 45 days out, the beginning of the next annual IEP meeting for whoever it may be on your caseload, this is when you're going to start and look for those common meeting times to hold that IEP meeting. And so how do you know when it's 45 days out? Before, at the very beginning of the school year, or if you get a new student to you in the middle of the year, the very first thing that you want to do when it comes to your caseload is you want to put all of your due dates on your calendar, whether that's a planner, paper calendar, or whether that is a digital calendar or your Google Calendar. You want to put all those due dates on. So when you see that due date coming up, around 45 days out, now it's time to start planning for that annual IEP meeting. So start finding those common meeting times. Then around 30 to 45 days out, so again, we're already starting 45 days out to find that common meeting time. Now is when we're going to start reaching out and scheduling that IEP meeting. So you want to send the invitations to the parents. You want to document your attempts, which we're going to get to here on this document here, the IEP meeting checklist. And then around 30 days out, so within those 2 weeks, we're going to document all of those times that we have reached out to the family to schedule that IEP meeting. We're going to get that IEP meeting scheduled. And then at the 30-day mark, we're going to start sending out those gen ed input forms, the parent input forms, and we're going to send out student input forms. We're going to work on those with the students in the classroom. But that is when we're going to start sending those out about 30 days out. I do have available in the Intentional IEP shop, we have our own input forms or questionnaires prior to the annual IEP meeting that you can send out. So I'll link those below here as well. We have the Google format, and we also have a printable format, so you can send either one. But again, 30 days out, you're going to send those out to get input from the rest of the IEP team. Once you send those input forms out, now is when you're going to start collecting all of your data, and you're going to start writing the present level section of the student's IEP. So 14 to 30 days out, once you have scheduled the IEP meeting, you've sent all those input forms out, now you can start crafting the present level section of the child's IEP. Why just the present level section? On the IEP writing timeline, it says write the student's IEP. Well, the present level section of the IEP is data. Everything going in there is data. We do have a present levels template here at the Intentional IEP. I'll link it below this training, but the present levels is all data. It's going to leave your breadcrumbs throughout the rest of the IEP as to what the IEP goals should be, what supports and services, what LRE, all of those things. And so we want to start crafting that now because it's the meat and potatoes for the rest of the IEP. This is where all the good stuff's going to be, right? And so we want to start writing that as soon as possible because we need to take good care and be very intentional with what we're putting in the present levels. So the PLAAFP, the PLOP, the PLEF, whatever you call it, I'm going to call it the present levels. Then, and this has such a wide range here because 3 to 14 days. Some states, I know in the state of Texas, you're required to send it 14 days prior to the IEP meeting. My best practice, I say, is 3 school days minimum prior to the IEP meeting. So if your IEP meeting is on a Monday, we're not sending it Friday. We're going to send it Wednesday prior to that Monday IEP meeting, because we want to make sure that the parents have enough time to look it over, sleep on it, digest the information, and ask any questions. But also, we want to make sure that we have enough time as the caseload manager and special education teacher to reach out to the family and ask them if they have any questions, concerns about this prior to that upcoming IEP meeting. Not only does this level the playing field for everyone on the IEP team, but it also gives you kind of a step ahead when it comes to that IEP meeting, because we only have the IEP meetings are blocked for a certain amount of time. That's not to say, however, that's all the time we have. We can have IEP meetings that are hours long. We can reconvene and have a second meeting, but we know that we usually schedule them for about 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And so if we can give ourselves a jump start, everybody has the data. We've all read it. Here are the proposed IEP goals, because that's what you're going to be sending in that draft IEP. I'll put a blog post here more about draft IEPs too below this training, but the draft IEP is going to be your present levels only in your proposed IEP goals. Anything more than that can be misconstrued as predetermination, and honestly will be predetermination. So sending home that proposed draft IEP is really going to level that playing field for all team members, give everyone the same data leading up to that IEP meeting. And the proposed goals are going to be based off the data in the present levels. Can they change? Yes, absolutely. They're only proposed based off of all of that input that we got from those input forms, and also from all of the data that we have taken over the last year and the baseline data that we've taken leading up to this annual IEP meeting. So we've talked about sending the draft. We've then talked about following up with the parents with the draft IEP. So 5 to 7 days out from that IEP meeting, we're going to confirm the IEP meeting again with all team members, and we're going to schedule the room availability. So I know some IEP meetings, I've held them in my own classroom. Most of them have been held in a office space in the school office area or an empty room where we usually have meetings. And so most times those rooms need to be scheduled out, and you need to have that booked out for your IEP meeting. So you want to make sure that you do that and check the room availability. When you're doing this, make sure that the room has enough chairs for everyone. Make sure that the projector is working, all of those things if you're going to need anything. And then 1 to 3 days out this is when you're going to have that pre-IEP meeting. This is not some states call it a staffing. This is not where we have the director or an admin come in and say, this is the only thing we're offering. This is where if we need to share any information, and this may not even be an official meeting, it may just be me as the special ed teacher meeting with the gen ed teacher and saying, hey, here's my proposed IEP goals. I shared them with you. What supports do you need in the classroom to help Stephanie if we propose these IEP goals? What supports is Stephanie going to need in your classroom to make progress with these IEP goals? It's where we're all trying to get on the same page with what the data is, what the data says, and what IEP goals we're going to be talking about or proposing, and how are we going to do that? So we're not going to predetermine services yet, but what accommodations are we going to talk about? I want you to start thinking about what we're going to be recommending, what we're going to be proposing, and how are we going to work together to make this happen, right? 1 day out from that IEP meeting, we're then going to be printing everything that we need. I don't like to do this the day of or the morning of the IEP meeting because the printer's going to be out of ink, you're going to be out of paper, technology's not going to work, the internet's going to be out, the IEP writing system's going to be refreshing. There's just so many things that could happen. And for my own teacher anxiety and just generalized anxiety, I like to have everything printed the day beforehand. And so 0 days out, that's when we're going to have an SSP meeting. But let's back up because we have our IEP meeting checklist, and I want to make sure we're covering everything on here as well, in addition to our IEP writing timeline. So IEP writing timeline is going to lead us up to that IEP meeting. So let's first talk about this before the IEP meeting. So we're going to have consent to assess. So that's not on the IEP writing checklist. So that's how these two are working together. So if we have a reevaluation coming up for this student, we're going to begin it before 45 days, right? We need to get that consent to assess, and it needs to be signed by the parent, especially if it's that initial eligibility. And so we need to make sure we have all of our T's crossed and all of our I's dotted when it comes to that. That 45 days out when we're trying to find meeting times, here's where you can document all of your attempts. So per IDEA law, you have to reach out 3 times. I recommend doing it 3 different ways: phone call, email, home visit, putting a note in a child's backpack, sending a certified letter home, whatever that may be, making sure you have 3 attempts documented to get that parent to attend the IEP meeting. Remember, you can hold virtual IEP meetings as well. I'll leave a blog post here about holding virtual IEP meetings. But then the next step is making sure your meeting is scheduled. All your team members have been notified. You've sent out that teacher input form. You've sent out the parent input form. The service providers, if there are any, are putting in their information, especially into the present levels. And then you're going to begin the draft, print the draft, copy the draft for the meeting, and then have the meeting agendas printed. So I will also link, we have editable meeting agendas for different types of IEP meetings in the Intentional IEP shop. So I'll link those below this training as well. But now it is time to talk about what do we do during the IEP meeting. So your agenda is really going to lead you in your IEP meeting, but this during the IEP meeting is going to give you a good first step as well if you wanted to write your own agendas. Again, I've linked ours below this training so you can click and go and use those if you'd like. To bring to the IEP meeting, you want to make sure you're bringing all of your data and any work samples that you do have for that student based off of the last year's data and the last year's work that the student has done. You want to bring all of those input forms that you got back from the parents, the teachers, the student, bring those with because that is data and you can access those and refer to those as you're going through, if you have to go through the present levels or the proposed goals or whatever it may be. You want to bring the student's file. If that's their CUME file, you can bring that. If you have your own student file, definitely bring that. You want to make sure you're bringing that IEP draft. So the present levels with the proposed IEP goals, make sure you have copies for everyone and you're bringing that to the IEP meeting so that you can look it over. Or if you're going to be projecting it onto the screen, you don't necessarily have to bring copies, but you could just project it onto the screen. So however you're bringing those things to the meeting, make sure you bring some blue pens, blue because it can be seen on white paper. Highlighters are also really helpful. Anything else that you may need during that IEP meeting to write on the document, make notes, all of that good stuff. During the IEP meeting, you're just going to discuss a lot of different things. Again, your agenda is going to lead you through that IEP meeting, but you want to make sure all the student information is correct, the parent guardian information is correct, that their contact information is now correct. Discuss the present levels, discuss the evaluation if it's an evaluation year, discuss those results. We're going to talk about goals and objectives, accommodations, modifications, other supports and services, related services. If it's transition, we're going to talk about that. Medicaid and consent to bill, we're going to make sure that we're all signing that we're at the IEP meeting. And remember, in some states, just because you sign that you're there in attendance of the IEP meeting is not saying that you agree with it. So making sure you know the laws and regulations about that in your state. And then getting parent and guardian consent and having everybody sign the paperwork. That is a very short-winded way of saying that is what we're doing at an IEP meeting. Again, your agenda is going to lead you there, and I'll link that below this training. Then it comes to after the IEP meeting. So just because you held the IEP meeting doesn't mean your work here is done as the caseload manager. Not only do we now have to begin implementing and taking data on this, but there's some other things that we want to follow up with and follow through with after that annual IEP meeting. So making sure any necessary corrections were made to that IEP. If you're not finalizing the IEP at the IEP meeting, now I've worked in a bunch of different states, different schools, and everywhere does it differently. So sometimes we finalize the IEP at the actual meeting and we've sent that home with the parent. Other times we're like, we're going to make our changes. We'll send it home. If everything looks good, you can sign it and send it back. So again, just making sure you know what your policies are and your rules and regulations and things are for what state you work in and also what your district policies are for all of that. To build the rapport and collaboration with the family after the IEP meeting, you definitely want to reach out to them and be like, hey, just wanted to check in. We had Stephanie's IEP meeting on Monday and it might be Wednesday. I would give them at least 48 hours and check in and just say, hey, just wanted to see how you were doing with it. I know it's been, 2 days, but I wanted to check and see if everything still feels good. If you have any additional questions, if you're worried about anything, just kind of checking in with them to see how they're doing after that meeting because lots of emotions at an IEP meeting. And then finalize that IEP meeting. Again, if you're not finalizing it at the actual IEP meeting, finalize it afterwards and make sure that's good. Make sure the parents get a copy. Make sure everyone working with the student gets a copy. At the intentional IEP, inside of our member resource library, we have the authorized members and they check off and sign their name if they got a copy of the child's IEP just for your own data so you can prove that you gave everybody a copy. You're going to send home that finalized IEP and you're going to distribute all the copies, making sure, depending upon where you work, again, school policies, do you need to make a copy for the CUME file? Do you need to make a copy for the audit file? How does all of that work? And so making sure that everybody has a copy and that there's copies where they need to be. Whew. That is a whole bunch of things. Again, all of that information came from these two little documents here. I'm also going to link again some different things below this training that you can go access to, the IEP agenda, blog posts and things that will help you with things. And then we also have our intentional IEP membership. I did mention it with one of our member resources. At the intentional IEP, we have an IEP Goal Bank that houses almost 10,000 pre-written IEP goals that you can use to help you in not starting from scratch when it comes to IEP goals, because you're searching for the skill within the IEP goal and then individualizing it further. To more than 2,000 of our IEP goals. So every academic IEP goal from pre-K through grade 6 is going to come with an IEP screener, and that is your baseline data, or you can use that as a progress monitoring probe throughout the school year to track data. You also have access to more trainings just like this one at the Intentional IEP. We have over 300 different trainings inside of our video vault for members, and then we have our member resource library, which houses almost 100 different resources, oh my goodness, for special education teachers and IEP team members to help you with data collection, implementation, all of the things that come with being the caseload manager and special education teacher of students with disabilities. So I will leave a link for membership if you would like to check that out. But if at any time you have more questions about the IEP meeting, the IEP meeting checklist, the IEP writing timeline, again, don't forget to download those two free resources. They're going to be linked, the first two things underneath this training. But if you have any questions about those or anything else here at the Intentional IEP, please reach out, support@theintentionaliep.com. I'm always happy to help. Don't forget to check out the additional links below to help you with other aspects of IEP writing, and I will see you in the next training.